A lesser objective of this series is to give some historical information of changes that I was able to see take place between releases. One of them, as I alluded to last time, was the change in the Reborn title theme. I like to talk about it like this. You know how when you start the game, or when you reset, you hear the first notes of the current theme like... I know I typically mash through the theme because the good part comes much later. However, when it was this theme, I would always wait just a little longer. Ooh, this one always hits my brain with undiluted nostalgia. This is the remix of Black and White's Route 10 by Glitch X City. This was the theme at the time I began Reborn in episode 14, and had been the theme for most if not all of the episodes before that. It was starting at episode 16 that this theme was removed, though not replaced with O Colosso's collab with Amethyst until episode 17, simply using the Opal Ward theme in the interim. But I always come back to this theme to remind myself of the beginning of my journey, and how I knew nothing. We return to our trudging journey where we left off, right after we defeated Florinia and were told to head to Jasper Ward to find Borealis and Victoria. We are now given an upgrade to our Pokegear, the Pulse Dex. As Florinia explains, this gives us vital information about the Pokemon amplified by the Pulse machines, of which she has already added the first one. If we peruse the entry for the Tangrowth we have already defeated, we see several things. First, as we discovered in Mosswater, it was indeed grass and poison. Second, it had an entirely different ability than is standard for a Tangrowth, Filter, which explains why even attacks it was weak to did relatively little. Finally, and most chillingly, the entry is named 5C. Combined with the fact that Jasper and Beryl are reported to be completely overrun by plants like Obsidia, and it stands to reason that we may not be done fighting disfigured Tangrowths. We will cross that bridge when we finally have to, but for now, let's go grab some newly available open world treats. First, return to the Pokemon Center in the school and talk to this girl to get the TM for Confide. Next, travel back to Obsidia Park during a sunny day to find a Petalil. Now it's time to get a new button to press obsessively. This event is one I never knew about, for good reason. It is incredibly cryptic to do this, and it is only available during this episode. You have to return to the Obsidia slums. While we're here, we can head for another event Pokemon to catch. On the way, though... Holy shit, he's here? Those of you who haven't played the game before just know that this is one of those times when replaying the game pays you back in spades. Getting right into the personal space of the man with the child reveals that the child, who apparently is from Beryl, is missing their mother, and in the meantime is playing with a metal finder stick? The man explains that the child shouldn't be here in a slum, and offers to take the child to care for him until he can contact his parents. He does so with some, embellishment. This service of his is apparently in the Lapis Ward, one we aren't scheduled to reach this episode. The child agrees, saying a line that they cannot possibly know how wrong it is. He asks the man if he can keep the candy he found, but the man advises not to for cleanliness' sake. This prompts the boy to want to throw away his finder stick too, but is told not to litter either. Good thing I'm here breathing down his neck to take the finder stick off their hands. Indeed, this finder stick is actually the item finder. The doctor escorts the child away, and the child leaves behind his candy. Pokemon don't care where it's from, it's candy. But now let's talk about that item finder. In Reborn, the item finder respects your time. So when you search with it, it will scan the currently visible screen for any items, and if it finds one, it will light it up precisely. No more facing a direction and playing hot and cold. Thank you, Ame and team. However, I'll ask you please forgive me. You're going to be seeing this text box in my footage very frequently. Anyway, let's go get that event Pokemon I mentioned, which you can find in this room that was empty from before. It's the beefy Pokemon that was mentioned last episode, being a Makuhita. Before we continue, let's head back to a TV and watch the news. The first thing we hear about from Gossip Gardevoir, yes, these news shows are run by a Gardevoir who talks, is that the police are returning to deal with Jasper and Beryl wards after Obsidia was finally brought under control. While speaking of trainers who are entering the ward for various possible goals, she reacts to a sudden appearance of something flying overhead. She inquires to the apparent young girl who has arrived about what she's doing, but the girl named rebuffs the Pokemon journalist, announcing that she will take care of Jasper herself. She then takes off on her Salamence? The same Gardevoir is on another channel interviewing, or attempting to interview, the ghost gym leader named Shade. However, like the fighting gym leader Samson in the previous episode, Shade is not very interested in speaking. At all. Until he does. And then he's gone. Finally, our friend DJ Arclight sheds light on another gym leader. Only he's not talking about an active gym leader, but a retired one, named Corey. Oh, apparently Corey was the poison gym leader, meaning he's the one from whom Kane inherited the post. Arclight reports that Corey has been seen frequenting a cemetery in Beryl, where he apparently lives, though why is unknown. Finally, the DJ gives us the lowdown on his battling prowess, revealing his ace is a Crobat. I told you it's a foreshadowing machine. Now, believe it or not, there's only one more event to do before continuing with the story, and we have to head pretty much all the way to Jasper Ward. Remember the girl from the beginning of the game that had the disobedient Snubble? She sees how we have 2 badges now, and could easily control the Snubble, and asks us to take care of it. Of course we will. So that's all we can do outside of the new wards. It's time to enter. The motif gets even darker now, conveying more than any other ward the sense of chaos and suffering that grips the city and people. We learn from the policeman that the state of Jasper and Beryl are much worse than anything we saw in Obsidia. He gratefully accepts us into the ward, and we will see for ourselves that things are indeed grim. However, the first thing, or rather person we see, is Corey, followed right after by this pink-haired girl, who immediately introduces herself as Heather, as Corey quickly goes to scold her for talking to strangers. Hey, we've met a couple times already. It's pretty obvious that Heather is Corey's daughter. She is apparently feeling pretty stifled and quickly leaves him to go home. Visibly peeved, he warns us of being here in Jasper, saying that nothing good remains here, himself included. He concludes by telling us what we saw, which is not him. One thing he's not wrong about, this ward is in dire straits. Flora has erupted through the streets at every turn, and entire buildings are destroyed by the plant life. It also prevents movement anywhere but west into what was a simple city park. However, to the east, we can discover a single meteor skulking among the trees. Talking to him reveals he is radioing to others about a... You would not believe how long this thread about the Sylveon takes to find its end. Again, game completion privilege. Fight Simon here, and then proceed into the police station. The police chief greets us, exhaustion and worry in his dialogue, as he informs us that his entire department is slowly atrophying, as he sends men out to deal with the catastrophe and find missing police only for less men to return. At this time, one cop arrives and recognizes us as the savior of Obsidia. This gets the chief's attention, who learns we're here to help in Jasper too. To that end, he asks us for a favor to find 5 missing police officers in the Jasper and Beryl wards. The other officer will relay his intel that there are 2 missing in Jasper and 3 in Beryl. Travel through one of the dilapidated buildings fighting a couple random trainers. On the north side, you'll find a cordoned off street with a Pokemon Center, as well as an alleyway where we can find one of the officers. However, though we can cut the first tree, we can't cut the vine, so we'll need to return here. Across the street from him, we will find a man frantically running in this building, panicking about his missing Mareep. We'd better keep an eye out for it. Also, down this alleyway during a clear day, we can find an Emolga, who we can battle and catch. Now proceed westward through the buildings and defeat Terra from Meteor here, to proceed back outside. As you approach the door though, you'll see the girl from before running outside. As soon as you exit, Heather will immediately greet you. She apparently rates us so-so on our ability to defeat Meteor Grunts, what is your deal, and invites us to go and beat up more. She has little respect for rules or authority, and definitely shows that she is quite young and naive. She runs off without you to the west, leading you to enter Malchus Forest. Like in Obsidia, you'll be tasked with a similar operation of cutting wriggling trees to remove blockading vines. To the north of the entrance to the area, though, is another way through the trees back to Jasper. Going here and into the building will pit you against a meteor grunt cornering an officer. Defeat the grunt to save the first cop. As for the building next door, the elevator in back is not functional. We'll try again later. As you delve deeper into this overgrown park turned death trap, you'll see a central structure, an abandoned and crumbling gym. Cutting this vine and heading back the way you came, Heather will apparate into existence in front of you and warn you about the 2 grunts now standing at the front of the gym. When they disperse, Heather tells you that there is a Pokemon hooked up to a machine inside the gym. She excitedly returns to kicking butt after giving you a super potion. Make your way around to the other side of the gym structure in a counterclockwise path and defeat grunts as you go. Right here, hang left behind the tree to find a narrow pathway, at the top of which you can find another free egg. This time I get Girafarig. It would be a nice idea to use, but the stats on this one are poor. Defeat 2 more grunts here and make your way south. Behind a cut tree, you'll find an item ball, but colored gray. Unlike items, which are red, TMs, which are yellow, and field effect readouts, which are green, the gray ones are the pulse readouts. So, ahead of the approaching conflict with another abomination, you are given a peek into what hell you will be facing. Indeed, as the original designation suggested, there is another Tangrowth in operation, but it is not a copy of the first. In fact, both its typing and ability are different. Being a grass ground type gives Ice, and by extension my Vanillite, a chance to shine, while Fire, Flying, and Bug can still hit the grass-based weaknesses. Arena Trap doesn't pose too much of a problem, definitely less than Filter. Return to the north and find Heather waiting outside the building. She heals you helpfully and points out the door on top of the gym, giving you the suggestion to treat the structure like a playground. Climb up the vines on the nearby pillar and jump across to reach the door and prepare, once again, for terror. Jumping down into the warm and inviting chasm puts you in a room that seems like it should be barely standing. Before walking up to the foreboding source of the devastation, use the item finder to pick up 2 items in the room. You can't get them later. Now, it's time for the horror to metamorphose. Step forward towards the person in the eerie light. They rather courteously introduce themselves as Taka, previously known as from here. He plainly lays the blame of the destruction of, in his words, lives, homes, and so much more on, as before, a Tangrowth inside another pulse. However, unlike Zell, Taka seems very sympathetic to the Pokemon, and even to you. Of course, besides the fact that he admits he's in Team Meteor and calls in an ambush of 3 grunts around you. He has been ordered to eliminate you. But luckily, Heather, magical maiden of the wind apparently, swoops in to even the odds. 2-on-4 still seems like a rigged game, but a Salamence. So the young girl from the news story was Heather, who has unleashed her pseudo-legendary. With Heather now easily taking on the chaff, that leaves you to deal with the abomination and Taka. Cue the red theme. Pulse Fight Round 2. This time, it isn't a 6-on-1. Taka has brought in 2 Pokemon of his own, but was a fool to stand in the way of Kricketune.
Rage Incarnate.
Of course, a single cutter makes 6 omelets of his execute, but then he leads into his own unlikely ace, Chatot. Don't be fooled. Chatot is a bastard of an opponent, and of course I don't have any electric or rock on me. Instead, I send out Frogadier to definitely outspeed and use Water Pulse for half its HP. However, it uses Chatter on me and confuses Frog. Can you guess what happens next? Every time. There's a damn monstrosity still waiting in the wings, and this bird is knocking out my team members. I go into Meowstic instead of Vanillite since I'm hoping to exploit the 4 times weakness on Tangrowth. I start by using Fake Out to inch its health down. Or just to kill it outright. You may be wondering why I'm not talking about something else right now, but just hold your horses. One more. Of course, the creature of the hour is next, and this time, unlike the one in Obsidia with Filter, this one should take more significant damage from fire, so out goes Numel. Unfortunately, I can't light the rocks on fire this time, and Tangrowth is nearly even in level with me. 2 Sand Tombs buries Numel as the Tangrowth eats an Oranberry to not quite crest half health. So let's bring Vanillite out and see if he can do what he does best. Vanillite goes for Avalanche, but Tangrowth goes first with Rock Tomb. But it misses. Clutch Master Vanillite. Still not time. That's okay. Good effort, Vanillite. But now I know I have the battle locked down, because once again, Meowstic can return and throw out a Fake Out to thrust the vertical-eyed tentacle monster into the rocks and end his hellish siege on the ward. So now that the battle is over, and you don't have to wait in suspense, you are probably wondering what exactly is the trigger for the MVP effect of this fight. Let's talk about the next field effect, Rocky Field. Right now, Rocky Field is a bit out of place in this part of the game. However, you will eventually have to travel on it for long stretches, so you'll be getting quite familiar with it. First off, if you already couldn't guess, Rock-type moves get a 50% boost in power. Pokemon with raised defense cannot flinch, and those Pokemon, along with any Pokemon behind a substitute, act like they have Bulletproof, which, to refresh, means you can't get hurt by these moves. If a Pokemon misses a contact move, they will lose 1/8 max HP unless they have Rock Head. If a Pokemon flinches, then they lose 1/4 max HP. This is ignored if they have Steadfast or Sturdy. This is what we have to thank for Meowstic knocking out 2 out of 3 of Taka's side. If you're a Decidueye, then sucks to be you, Fern, because you lose 10% accuracy on all of your moves. Rock Smash gets double power. These 5 moves get 50% extra power and a rock secondary type. Accelerock gains 50% power as well. Let me remind you that it already got a 50% increase from the general rock boost, making it a 90 power priority move. Rock Polish raises speed by 3 stages. Damage dealt by Stealth Rock is doubled just like in Cave. Great. Nature Power becomes Rock Smash. Camo is Rock, no way. Secret Power may flinch. A Telluric Seed raises defense by 1 stage and causes Stealth Rock damage to the user. And that's it. It's a pretty thin field. Won't register for much pain having to fight here, though there are some applications that will make it miserable. Flinches and misses end up tilting scales even more than they otherwise would, so accuracy and evasion shenanigans along with things like King's Rock or Serene Grace will become huge issues. However, most of the time this won't be a big deal, except of course for the fact that just won me this second pulse fight. Depth 3, difficulty 3. With the second pulse decommissioned, Taka tells us there is actually one more Tangrowth pulse drawing and snuffing breath in the barrel ward. Yeah, it's obviously a trap, but that's a problem for future Oildrum. We escape the receding flora on Heather's Salamence, but we have a little omniscience as we get to listen in on a conversation the Grunts and Taka have. Apparently, Heather is wearing a ruby ring. You know it's important because the words are capitalized. Taka doesn't seem to care so much, and our third-person omniscience ends. Back outside, Heather, in her childlike manner, is disappointed when the entire building doesn't collapse, unlike many of the other buildings in the ward. What does collapse is our reputation in Corey's eyes, who immediately screams into the scene to lay some vocabulary on us. However, he cuts himself off when he notices that Heather is wearing, as Corey states, her mother's ring. This incenses Heather, who reveals that Corey has never told Heather anything about her own mother. Corey tries to take control of the conversation again, but Heather redirects to the fact that we just fought 4 criminals with a pet catastrophe, boasting how she could beat 3 grunts to our 1 Lovecraftian monster. However, all Corey angrily cares about is if they saw her ring. At this point, Heather stonewalls him and flies away on her Salamence. With Heather out of the range of his voice, he changes its target to the only other person in the area. Whatever respect we had with him from before is now pretty damn gone, as he warns us to stay away from him and Heather. Well, now that that lovely and not uncomfortable display of dysfunction is over, walk over to the right and get this big route. Now it's time to return to Jasper Ward. Going to the northern part of the ward, we can enter the building with the broken elevator to find that functionality was restored to 1 floor. Going up to it, we discover a girl unscathed. She complains unaware to us that the elevator has been out, until realizing how we must have gotten up here. With that, she gives us her gratitude and escapes the Death Trap building. She mentioned that she was going to see her friend in Peridot who had sent for her. If you go to where that is, You'll find her safe, and her friend will be relieved and thankful to you. As a reward, you get a department store sticker. As well, her friend will give you the TM for Sleep Talk. A new sticker means another floor has been unlocked in the Obsidia department store. The floor holds niche items and prolonging items. Of course, niche really means niche. I mean, how often do you care to become heavier or lighter than usual? And how often do you need moves like Wrap to last longer? There are some interesting items like Eject Button and Red Card, but they are on the expensive side, so I wouldn't buy them. The other side of the floor holds the Weather Extending Stones, which are nice sounding in theory, but let me give you a hint without spoiling it. Don't buy these. Trust me. Go a bit longer and you won't need to spend a dime on these items. Let's return to Jasper and meet up with the officer that was stuck behind the vine. That makes 2 officers. All 3 that remain are in the next ward. Now that the east side of the ward is no longer barricaded by murderous plants, you can enter this building and find a panicking Mareep. If you talk to it, you'll get to pick it up if you feed it Pokesnacks. Funnily, or maybe unfunnily, the man who was running around frantically in the other building looking for the Mareep is now gone. Sorry, buddy. Behind where he was, though, in the now open room, is a broken elevator and a new field effect readout for Forest Field. That concludes our foray into the Jasper ward. With that, our mission is now to proceed into... No longer is the game sugarcoating it. Death has been here. It will come again. This is by far the most haunting version of the main motif, its ultimate expression of despair. The looming church organ constantly following you, and the synthetic keyboard underlying, creates a tone of such anguish, not your own, but everyone else's, which as you continue in your quest will become yours as well. Special shout out to Dragon Tamer 795 for this piece, co-credited with Amethyst according to the credits of the music. You don't know how much this music haunts me. The ward is choked worse with vines than Jasper, and only 2 directions are available. Going east first leads to Barrel Bridge, upon which you can find a heart scale. Following the bridge to the end leads you to a large abandoned building marked as a Urayu power plant, which is locked. If it is windy, then you can find a child here, having been floated here by the nearby Drifloon, which you can battle and obtain. The child will thank us and return to Lapis Ward. There's nowhere else to go in Barrel, so you must enter the entrance on the left, into another natural nightmare. However, what you're about to hear would make you think it is a paradise. You want to talk about glow up? What you're seeing is by far the greatest improvement of an early game area in the entire project. What used to be a forest that was monotonously similar to Malchus Forest is now a location that will stick with you long after you finish Reborn. You want to know why I said my one-line review of this game? This is it. The tonal shift of Barrel Ward's complete misery to the soaring majesty of Glitch X City's remix of The Slumbering Weald tells you one thing. You must keep going, no matter how horrible it gets. The end will be worth all of the suffering. Welcome to Rotocrene Jungle, a massive dungeon with a ton of paths to take and secrets to plunder. It also contains a choice in your routing, though you may not realize it at first. Most of you playing the game will probably, like me, go up the first pathway here and then get baited into this trap. This alerts a couple Nuzleafs who then promptly knock you out and dump you into another cage, only to be woken up by... fuck's sake. So the worst person will find you and offer to let you out of the cage. If you beg him. Yeah, that's a no from me, dog. Fuck you, Fern. This leaves you wondering when the game will let you out, or if you may have bricked your save. That's when a chatot suddenly emerges from the foliage and opens the cage, then parroting the command it was given. Interesting. So Taka wanted you to get out. You can then head to the east to find another cage with Kane trapped inside. He will be very happy to see you, and at this point you would leave this cage area to proceed to the rest of the dungeon. But what else can you do? If you go around the trap, you can get that item, which is a rare candy. Nice. You can then walk to the left and come upon a camp of 3 meteor grunts, guarding the rest of the jungle, apparently lying in wait for a gym leader. They gab about how the second pulse's removal is already known, and they lay the blame on Taka, calling him incompetent. However, one of the grunts warns against shit-talking Taka because of the commander. Now you have to try to sneak by them. It's a strange thing because you'd think that getting close to them would get you caught, but no, just don't stand in front of them or touch grass. Instead, walk around them and avoid the grass to access the rest of the jungle. What is the purpose of this fork in the road? Each path influences relationship scores with characters differently. If you were to do what I did first and get caught and say fuck you Fern, then you get -1 points with Fern and +1 points with Kane, along with -1 with Heather. If you were to beg Fern, he will demand you go all out and grovel for him, each time increasing the amount of points you get, all the way up to +5, but that isn't happening. What the sneaky path gives you is only +1 to Fern, and no others. Speaking of Fern, going up and to the right from the grunt guards leads you to him, where he divulges that he has indeed started the league challenge and promptly badmouths his sister and Julia. Surprisingly, as a rival, he does not fight you here, instead saying he wants you to go traipsing through the jungle to do the hard work for him. It's shitty, but you have to do it anyway. By the way, that house on the right has a guy who will heal your Pokemon. You'll have to contend with meteor grunts and some errant trainers here, but if you make your way to the north of the jungle, you find a cave entrance, which leads you to the Underroot. This place is enormous, and is littered with items detectable by your item finder, some of which are in places that you'll realize you can't reach until you get far enough into the Metroidvania. The Underroot is also home to several events, the first of which is the third officer trapped in a cage. Heading down the staircases all the way through the cavern will lead you to this exit out. Up above, taking a left and weaving up to a clearing will give you a chance encounter with a Stantler. Head back the way you came until you see the fallen building with the blinking light in the window. You can enter the building here and find the fourth officer trapped by a meteor. Dispatch him to free another officer. This house here has a lady who I never understood what she was for. She simply guilts you for existing and tells you to leave. However, if you have a grass starter, then she will teach it Giga Drain. I never got that until I read Big JRA's guide. Pretty cryptic if you ask me. In any case, return to the Underroot, but head to the left instead of back up the cavern, and you'll find us a viper drinking from the pond. You'll also see for the first time a strange glowing stone. Oh boy, not this episode, you bastard. You'll find a lot of items here that you can easily pick up, but you'll be stumped by the interactive elements that you're not allowed to reach. This glowing rock does nothing, and you can't reach the wriggling trees to cut them. On top of that, there's an item ball of yet another color. That one is a Mega Stone. Wow, how do you get it? I'll tell you, if you keep watching this series. So anyway, go into that exit nearby and emerge near a way back to Barrow Ward. You'll find a library here, along with a PP up. Enter the library to accomplish a few things. First, shimmy onto these bookshelves to obtain the TM for Safeguard. Then walk on these bookshelves to obtain a field effect readout that I will explain later. On the right side room of the first floor, after cutting across the floor above, you will find a Growlithe barking down a chasm. If you look down, you will find out that you have already saved all of the officers you could. The Growlithe returns on its own to the station. Inside the same room with you is an ill-fated doll. Why on earth you would take that in-universe, I don't know. but you're going to take it. So that leaves this last room on the left and... oh! So, you talk to the man who seems not the least bit perturbed by the carnage around him, who mutters that what he seeks is not here. However, he goes out on the mother of all limbs and poses a question to me. Have I heard of dream sickness? Yes, truly. I could tell you, but you won't hear me, stranger. But I will see you again. It's time to continue. First, though, we want to return to the police station to see the chief. We found all 5 of the officers, and for our efforts, we are conferred the spare Growlithe in honor of the fallen officer. I spend a few tries bending space and time to my will until I get this Growlithe that has both good enough stats overall and close combat. Hell yeah, just a killer move. Now let's return to the jungle and do a few more events before moving on to the fight for your life section of the video. Head back to where Fern is by the healing house and go south. There is a bridge to cross here and a grunt to mow down. Head west and list north until you see an upright building with a light shard out front. Enter and meet a man who is looking for the worst statted Pokemon in Gen 7, Sunkern. If you trade it to him, you'll get a Pokemon chosen at random from a pool of 4. For me, I got Cryogonal. It also comes with an EXP share. Thank you. Go more to the west past this building and pick up this calcium by the ranger, then go over that bridge. If it is sunny, then a rather powerful Tropius will be here to accept your challenge. Now return to the ranger and go south, picking up items as you go, and find this covered pit. Once you have picked up everything around here, jump in and land in this area that was cut off by the route. Now that you're on this side, you can cut the route and also walk up these stairs. Walking to the east, you'll find a single stump, which will quickly be roosted upon by a Taillow. Take on the Taillow, they'll be warned that it is much lower level, so hopefully you also have False Swipe. Now we are closing in on doing the actual progression through the jungle. But let's return to the healing house and head back west, then northwest. On the west end of the jungle, you'll find this half of a building, which like the one with the officer, you can enter and get the Psych Up TM. You can then go up the nearby stairs and find the area where Kane and I were trapped in the other timeline. At this point, head along the narrow path just above the wooden floor, and eventually, you will see another pulse readout. Be mindful again of the concealed pit trap, and walk around it to obtain the readout. With this, you can unveil the upcoming 3rd Tangrowth, which stands to be the worst of the 3 from a typing perspective, being the same as Cradily. On top of that, it possesses stamina, meaning if you are using physical attacks, then your damage is going to fall off a cliff. Let's begin progressing to encounter this frightful opponent. To advance towards certain doom, first walk up this hill to find the first vine to cut. As soon as we do so, it alerts someone nearby. We spy 2 characters we have never seen before, one of which, the menacing man on the left, is referred to by the grunt as Commander, Meteor's leader. He tells the 2 others here that someone named Sirius is preparing a demonstration in North Obsidia. He mentions that he will take the girl with him, meaning Victoria. As for this operation, he leaves that to the woman with the green hair, who stoically complies. You can't scare me. I know all of your secrets this time. In order to reach the pulse, we will now need to go back to the portion of Barrow with the library, which means spelunking through the underground again. Once there, we punch through this building and the guard in it to reach this section of jungle. Up from here, we will discover which leader Meteor was talking about, Amaria. She says she was on the trail of Borealis, who is here in the jungle along with several other agents. She becomes impressed with you when she finds out you were the one that shut down the 2nd pulse, but warns of the dangers ahead, choosing to bide her time in secrecy. Amaria can heal us if we talk to her again, and then we can mount the hill to the left to cut the 2nd vine. This will open the way towards the showdown with Tangrowth 5A. Return all the way back to Fern and prepare. We step forward and quickly find that this was a really stupid idea. Now, instead of being surrounded by 3 grunts and 1 agent, we are now facing down the barrel of 5 agents at once. As you could guess from 100 miles away, Taka lured me into a trap, and now he, Ace, Zell, Borealis and the other person are probably going to kill me. That is, unless Amaria can help me. Though Borealis is quick to tear her down for thinking she was being sneaky. However, it turns out the meteor agents are not so perceptive. As another ally drops in, Kane immediately squares up with Taka. Zell tries to push the idea of us being outnumbered, until Fern gets in their face, saying probably the only nice thing he will ever say to us, and we had to save Scum for this timeline. Now numbers aren't so lopsided for us, though Amaria's goal of rescuing Victoria is dashed when she finds out that she is not here either. Borealis continues to berate Amaria with vocabulary that would make Florinia raise neither eyebrow, but still. Amaria then says what we're all thinking, and says it's better to at least try. Borealis asserts he does not have that privilege, and finally brings out his Crobat to challenge Amaria's Lapras. Just then, a late entrant drops into the arena, as Heather appears from the sky to beat up the bad guys, getting a strangely inquisitive response from Borealis. So who will face the girl with the Salamence? This one. We'll talk about that later. For us, it's time to go up against Ace, Ace of Clubs, and the reset counter is ready. Even though I said that most major fights have a full team of 6, Ace still couldn't decide on one more team member and fights us with 5. However, the Pulse is basically a mega evolution, so I think it's pretty even. Without knowledge of what Ace leads with, I try leading with Vanillite, only to discover that Ace is just going to start with the goddamn Pulse. Not only that, but a Telluric Seed goes off to stop Taunt from landing on the only turn Vanillite will have a chance to attack. He's already down to 2 feint attacks as I attempt to bring out the Furious Cricket to make use of the Forest Field against the 3-eyed iteration of the Vine Monster. However, Ace quickly does a smart pivot into their own personal ace, Breakson, who can easily wall Kricketune. I attempt to go for the Sing, but lose most of my health in the process and fail to put it to sleep. I do my own pivot to the Water Starter of the same generation, but Breakson is now a runaway train. Worse still, it uses Hypnosis and gets annoyingly lucky with a max turn sleep, Psybeaming me all the while. Frog incredibly gets to survive on 1 HP to land a Water Pulse, but before I could quick attack it down, it eats a Citrus Berry and the priority move is not enough for a kill. Frog is finished off, as Ace then does something a trainer hasn't done to me in this game so far this run. Use a healing item. That really sucks, doesn't it? Especially as Meowstic's Fake Out basically goes to waste. As before, the sped up Fox puts me to sleep and begins wailing on me with Flame Charge, while I get super unlucky with sleep again. Meowstic awakens to land 2 Psyshocks on the fortunately not yet Psychic type. Once again, my Pokemon is able to barely survive the attacks and finally put down the Breakson. In my mind, I'm already pretty checked out on this attempt, being down 2 with 2 others just barely hanging on. Now Tangrowth is coming back out, so I go back to Kricketune knowing it's slow. I then drop the Monstrosity with 1 Struggle Bug, only to discover, as some of you eagle-eyed viewers might have noticed, that this isn't a Tangrowth that's using Feint Attack. It's actually a Zorua. Should have expected a Magician to employ a tactic like that. It's funny that I managed to outspeed it though. Now Ace goes to Roselia, who is color matching with Ace, and I use Meowstic. With 6 HP, I'm pretty pessimistic about killing the Roselia, but a Fake Out and Psyshock is actually enough. Suddenly, the fight doesn't seem impossible, as Ace is about to send out Baltoy, to which I answer with Cherrim. Setting up a sunny day for Flower Gift, I take a tiny amount of damage and then crush the Baltoy. That's what you get for having NFEs, Ace. Now it's up to Cherrim to stand up to the Petrifying Grass Rock type. Cherrim is locked into Petal Dance, but with the Forest boosting the move and the Tangrowth having the same typing as Cradily, making Petal Dance neutral effective, the outlook is turning in my favor. Petal Dance indeed does great damage, promising a 3-hit if we can survive. Stamina doesn't even apply in this situation, but the Tangrowth goes for half its namesake, which is boosted in the Forest. I land a second Petal Dance to bring Tangrowth to red. However, Cherrim is both confused due to fatigue and hit with a brutal Rock Tomb that lowers our speed. Now I have to hope to thread 3 needles. That I still go first, that I don't hit myself, and that Ace doesn't do something that keeps the Tangrowth alive. Amazingly, on an attempt I felt nothing but despair, All of the stars align and I outspeed to hit the beast with another pedal dance and come out victorious. The fact the fight slid downhill that fast and then rebounded the way it did is crazy. This is another reason I was excited to replay Reborn and record it this time. So many unbelievable things happen in this game like this, that it makes the crushing, horrendous obstacles so fulfilling to conquer. With this, the final Tangrowth has been rooted out. So, how did our friends' fights go? How can this be? This woman was called a private, and then just viciously defeats a girl using a salamence like it was nothing? Immediately, Borealis yells out Heather's name, suspending his fight with Amaria to run to her. As the green-haired woman coldly mocks, this pretty much gives away the identity of Borealis. Borealis orders his Crobat to take Heather to safety, as he turns to excoriate the woman for her ruthless treatment of the young girl, only to be countered that there was nothing to stop her. The woman then questions him for allowing an enemy to escape, which Ace agrees will necessitate Borealis explain to the commander. Ace suggests confiding in them about Borealis' true intentions to assuage their mind. However, the unnamed woman, who I will not call is quick to brand Borealis traitor, all for the sake of loyalty to Meteor. Throughout this engagement, the Tangrowth's effects are receding once again, and when an opening appears, Amaria gets between Borealis and the woman and pleads for us to escape. Though Borealis completely disbelieves Amaria's intentions, he takes the chance to run, which we do too. This leads us to the northern end of Barrow Ward, where we see Borealis running east. We cannot return to the jungle at this time, and so we pursue Borealis, who is held up by a bum asking for help. Borealis plans to brush him off, until he finds himself surrounded by the police in a sting, learning that this was possible because of us, and that the trap was laid by Amaria. He turns in anger to us, his suspicion about her compassion being true. Finally, the truth is revealed, as you probably all realized long ago. Borealis is Corey. The chief is shocked to see this, considering how much Corey had been appearing to help the police and trusted him based on his merit of being a gym leader from before. However, Corey admits that he was sabotaging them, and chides them for trusting him simply on his position of authority. Furthermore, he warns a League member being corrupted is not an isolated event. The chief still thinks that he can bring Corey in, but the former gym leader deploys a smoke bomb and escapes anyway. We are free to walk east back into the remainder of Barrow Ward. Before we give chase, we can go into this apartment nearby. If we go up to the roof on a sunny day, we will find a helioptile up here. To the south across the mart, we will find this man, whose life is in shambles with nothing left. He asks for some money. We are then prompted to enter an amount. If you give him $5,000, a very significant amount, we will get a very significant reward in return, the Magnetic Lure. This is a fantastic item that you give to your Pokemon to hold. When doing so, when you enter a battle with a wild Pokemon, if there are any Pokemon in that area that you haven't caught yet, it will force them to spawn instead of any that you have already caught. This is so useful. I know all you completionists would do anything for something like this in base Pokemon games. There's one more thing we need to backtrack for. We need to go back to the library now that the Tangrowth is gone, and return to the room where we met the stranger. We can pick up a Twisted Spoon here, which is going right into Meowstic's hands. Now return to the Pokemon Center in Barrow and head north to the end of the episode, as a cloud of despair is slowly beginning to accumulate. You'll quickly find the gym, and hear Barrow's music take even one more step into darkness. This is all for what you can find to the west after picking up this HP up. If you remember from Arclight's rundown of Corey, Barrow contains a cemetery in which lies the names of none that you know, all of which I know. Soon, you'll know too. It's time. Enter the gym and find the chief waiting by the door, along with the flashing console. Talking to the chief, he relays that his men have all been affected by a strange gas emitting from the reactors, causing them to turn confused and hostile. He will then hand you something that he thinks may help, another field effect readout. He explains that the reactors in the gym will create the field effect mentioned. Before we continue, it's time to go over both of the field effect readouts from this episode, because they are closely linked. First will be the one the chief just handed us, Corrosive Mist Field. Corrosive Mist Field is a very hostile field, but here's something to remember. It appears very few times in this game. Its relative absence makes it not the worst thing you'll deal with, because you'll only have to play around it a few times. But what does it do? For starters, fire-type moves get a 50% boost, and flying special moves will gain a poison secondary type. The most annoying thing is that all poisonable Pokemon will get poisoned at the end of each turn, so you'll be constantly on a clock. Aftermath doubles its damage to 50% of the attacker's max HP. Merciless activates. Water Compaction is activated on switch-in, for that Palossand you definitely have. Corrosion boosts damage by the bearer by 1.5 times, so watch out for the Salazzle, which Corey does not have. Dry Skin will take away 1/8 max HP if the Pokemon isn't Poison or Steel. Poison types will get back 1/8 max HP. Bubble, Bubble Beam, and Sparkling Aria go up 50% power and get a second Poison type, while Acid Spray, Clear Smog, and Smog get just a 50% boost. Acid Armor raises defense by 3 stages. Energy Ball gains a secondary poison type. Venoshock will always act like the target is poisoned, making it a 130 power move. Holy cow. Venom Drench's effect is always applied. Toxic gets 100% accuracy. Floral Healing will cause poison when it hits the target. Aqua Ring will cause damage instead of healing unless the user is Poison or Steel. Nature Power becomes Venoshock. Camo is Poison. Secret Power may Poison. Using an Elemental Seed raises both attacks by 1 stage, but will badly poison the user. There are lots of ways to terminate this field, like using Gravity or any of these moves. However, if you use any of these moves to terminate the field, then instead you'll combust the field and everything will faint. Unless they are in a semi-invulnerable turn, they have Flash Fire, one of the protection moves, Endure, or Sturdy with full HP. If a Pokemon has Damp, the field won't combust at all. In summary, this field is strange. It can cause some painful interactions and you can't last long on it unless you use poison types. But it strangely doesn't increase poison move power in general. It's here mostly for very specifically crafted fights. Having steel or poison types of your own will greatly hamper most of the things this field is trying to do, and most moves won't even be affected. Like I said before too, this field is really rare for some reason. Probably because there's like 6 other fucking poison fields. Depth 3. Difficulty 5. Speaking of other poison fields, in this upcoming fight, despite what the field effect readout says, detonating the field with one of the fire or explosion moves will transform the field into Corrosive Field, something that otherwise should only happen when using Gravity. Oh, and by the way, using Seed Flare, yes, that move known only by Shaman, will change Corrosive Mist to Misty Field, hence the blue line on the Galaxy map. Speaking of Galaxy map, let's plot Corrosive Field and get into it. Now we're on Corrosive Field, a much more difficult terrain to deal with, very similar to Burning Field. The worst problem here is that switching into this field causes massive damage, being double the power of Stealth Rock. That's right, a normally affected Pokemon, that is, one that isn't airborne, poison, steel, or having one of these abilities, loses 1/4 of their HP, and that scales based on weakness to poison. That means if your name is Whimsicott, Shiinotic, or Tapu Bulu, you instantly die. Besides this brutal hazard, any Pokemon that is sleeping at the end of a turn will also take 1/16 max HP damage, again unless they are immune to the switch-in effect. Grass-type moves gain Poison as a secondary type. Merciless and Toxic Boost are activated, so be very careful around Zangooses, Zangeese, and Toxapexes. Toxapeces?
Corrosion additionally makes the user deal 50% more damage. Holy crap, watch out for Salazzle here too. Poison Heal additionally restores 1/8 max HP if the user is on the ground. Grass Pelt conversely causes 1/8 max HP damage unless poison or steel type. These moves have double power, and these moves have 50% power with an extra poison typing. Many of these following effects may sound familiar. Acid Armor raises defense by 3 stages. Venom Shock will always have 130 power like if the target was poisoned. Venom Drench works regardless of the target being poisoned or not. These 4 moves have 100% accuracy. Toxic Spikes cannot be absorbed. Floral Healing will now also poison the user. Ingrain will cause 1/16 max HP damage instead of healing, but again not for poison or steel types. Nature Power is Acid Spray. Camo is Poison. Secret Power may... Go on, you got this. That's right, Poison. Using a Telluric Seed gives the user a baneful bunker. This leaves Corrosive Field as one of the more dangerous and exhausting fields in Reborn, while giving poison teams a lot of flexibility in archetype. Using Sleep and setting up Toxic Spikes or other hazards while getting the built-in hazard damage can make for awful battles, and specific Pokemon become beasts on this field. This is essentially the Toxapex field, so prepare to fight them here and maybe get one of them yourself. Depth 5, Difficulty 5. Now that you know the field effects we may see in the upcoming battle with Corey, let's first liberate the 3 officers in this room. Upon doing so, you'll find that Corey is nowhere to be found, at least not in the gym arena in the back. Instead, you'll be tasked with another gym puzzle. The 6 reactors in the middle are red and blue, and must all be turned blue to access a secret room. It functions like puzzles you may have seen elsewhere, where clicking one of the pillars will change its color along with all of the pillars next to it, not diagonally. From this configuration, that means we can solve it in only 2 moves. Seems like if you wanted a secret room, you'd make the solution a little more robust, but then again, it's not like that's the worst decision Corey has made. Enter the secret room to discover Heather asleep in bed and Corey in the back. He'll immediately react to you with anger, until he relents and admits that he can't blame us for what's happened. Instead, he asks us to grant him a request and duel him. This is starting to feel wrong. Do we need to fight Corey like this? You don't have a choice in this matter though. It is a game, which advances when you do what you're supposed to. So head up into the gym arena and talk with Corey again. His bitterness towards life begins to turn inward, as he tears himself down for his actions. In his last moments of freedom, he simply asks for us to defeat him as the villain he made himself into. To this end, he activates the Corrosive Mist, and the fight begins. The music you hear for this fight isn't the gym leader battle music from the last 2 gyms. Instead, it is Glitch City's remix of the Deoxys battle, a choice that, as you'll hear, really hammers home this feeling that doing this will not lead to an outcome you want, but you must. Let me run down my team here, since we are actually doing a 6v6 battle for the first time this episode. First, let's go over the team members that are going to be essential. First, Meowstic. She is going to be a powerhouse if used correctly, but she isn't the fastest or toughest, so against something like his Crobat, she could get wrecked. Numel is also going to be a staple, being both ground, which is an obvious advantage over poison, again except for Crobat, and having fire to make use of the Corrosive Mist field. For that reason, Growlithe will also be pretty strong. Next, Frogadier will be neutral in this fight, while being able to tank fire attacks should they come back our way. After that, I do have Kricketune, but truth be told, I don't expect him to do very much here. He's obviously type mismatch for this gym, both offensively walled and defensively doored, but I'm still bringing him. Then there's Vanillite. Though I really like Vanillux, his first form of 3 leaves a lot to be desired, and he's far too low leveled. I'll be honest, on this first attempt, I'm not confident at all, and it will show why. I lead with Growlithe in an attempt to use the fire boost to my advantage, though Skrelp's water typing screws that up. First turn, the Skrelp flinches, which is nice, but then it gets a crit with the field boosted bubble and faints Growlithe, so I go out to Meowstic. He immediately switches to Skuntank, which is a wall and a half to Meowstic. Disarming Voice barely does anything, and his Pursuit does a lot. Naturally being Dark type, Psyshock does nothing and Meowstic goes down. I send out Cricketoon, who similarly is poorly suited to the task of beating this beefy fucker. He can withstand a boosted flamethrower though, because he's a beast. However, a Fury Cutter does too little to make a difference, and next up to the plate is who I should have actually used, Numel. However, by this point I've conceded, and just used Lava Plume for fun to auto-knock out both of us, though the regular damage actually kills the skunk. Now we've transitioned to Corrosive Field, which is probably even worse for me since every time I send a Pokemon out, they automatically take hazard damage. He sends out a Croagunk to my Frogadier, and he drinks up my Water Pulse with dry skin. I mess around with him by using Quick Attack and making him fail Sucker Punch, but he quickly changes to Drain Punch to end both Frogadier and Vanillite. So yeah, complete disaster. We're going to need to completely change things up. Let's stop for a moment though for a quick aside, since there isn't really a better time to mention this. I want to talk about the change that occurred in E19 in respect to Corey's fight. Before E19, Corey was still being called the active poison gym leader. He always was a meteor, and was outed in front of Heather, who flees from him upset and angry. This causes him to direct more anger at us than what was shown now. However, you would be under the impression that you would still get a new badge, but when the battle ended, he would do no such thing, thus stranding you at the same level cap even though you expected him to increase it. Kudos to Amethyst recognizing this issue. She and her team rewrote the story about Corey slightly to make it clear that he is definitely not the active poison gym leader anymore. Therefore, you should not expect to increase the level cap after him, which means it would be prudent to stay a few levels away from the cap since you'll need to complete another episode at least before obtaining the next badge. Now that that's been mentioned, it's time to get back to the battle. First, let's talk about who's out. Vanillite. I want to use him, but he would have to evolve all the way at level 35 to be reasonably competent. At this level boundary, he's not ready. With that said, let's show who's in. Yeah, we're gonna step up the evolutions now. Numel is back to being my slow tub of death, Camerupt, evolving all the way up at level 33. This is not something I would recommend doing with your whole team for Corey because of the level cap. However, common candies are there if you need to bring your team back down before the next cap elevation. Then along with Camerupt is our friend Blitzel, now evolved into Zeb Strika. Zeb is here mostly to have an answer to Crobat, who, like Julia's Electrode, is not going to be outsped by us. The levels of most of my team are still down below 30, an appropriate level for this end of episode point, but now my confidence is much higher. Leading on round 2 with Meowstic this time to actually have a type advantage against the Skrelp. I go straight for the kill with Psyshock, but discover he's holding a Focus Sash, so he lives. However, his bubble does not kill me this time, and a second Psyshock faints him. Predictably, Corey is going to send his wall and a half out again, but I'm going to send my own freight train to meet him. His Chunkster is faster and blinds me with Smokescreen, but Camerupt muscles through like a boss and blows him down with one Earth Power, which to remind you is a ground-type flamethrower, so yeah, fucking ridiculous. Now if you were Corey, and you had to pick something to counter Camerupt, which Pokemon would you send? If you said Crobat, congratulations, it's time to fight his ace now. This of course leads me to use my hand-picked counter to him, Zeb. However, a Crobat is going to be faster than me, guaranteed, and will two-shot me. The good thing is, halving his speed with Thunder Wave will pay me dividends. Indeed, the full power Venoshock will kill me in another hit, but I go first on the second turn to take out half his HP with Spark. Zeb heroically feints to open up the floor to Meowstic again, who can come back out and ground the bat with one more Psyshock. Now, Corey gets ready to send in Marini, but Meowstic is about to go on a tear. Psyshock blasts the urchin out of existence, and immediately does the same to his falling Nidorina. That leaves him with his last Pokemon, the one that gave him victory last time, Croagunk. Time for some payback, you little... God, I hate that move. But Camerupt won't be fazed by a single Sucker Punch. So, that time went pretty well, but let's say this is one of those times when victory isn't sweet. Immediately after the battle, Corey's moroseness is front and center, knowing he has no place to go, either back to Meteor, who will brand him a traitor, or to civilian life, where the police will arrest him. But to exacerbate his gloom is Heather entering the room, having learned of his nefarious double life from the officers. She demands answers to why he has never told her what the threat is, as he insists he is keeping her safe, though having said that Heather was and could still be used as a bargaining chip against him. Heather throws up her hands to Corey's vagueness and claims she is going to cut him out for good, with a lot of the common domestic angst language being thrown around between the two. The last thing that Corey tells Heather, though, is that if she has her mother's ring, she must not lose it. With Heather gone, Corey tells us something very concerning before leaving to the Barrel Bridge. Walking outside the gym, we... When we arrive halfway across the bridge, we witness Corey releasing all of his Pokemon, though both his Nidorina and Crobat are obviously upset and worried. However, they have no way of convincing him otherwise. He then speaks to us about his past, about how Meteor was not something he joined willingly. He relates his story of when he came across the ring, a dazzling ruby ring from a wandering merchant, which he presented to the love of his life. He claims that he was actually happy during that time, when they married and were going to have their child. But his wife did not survive Heather's birth. He then illuminates the true cruelty of Meteor for the first time, as he says that her death was not an accident as he was informed, but that a man was dispatched to get her ruby ring and killed her in the process of her delivery of Heather to do so. For this heinous act, Corey exacted bodily vengeance on the man and took the ring back, but that man took Heather. For this, Corey is forced to enter into service for Meteor for her life, even allowed to keep the ring for the time being. He had Heather and the ring, but now no more. He makes a mention that returning to Meteor now is completely out of the question, both because of the police and because of the green-haired woman, who he senses will be the first to use Heather against him. Instead of all this, he asks us to help Heather and keep her safe, telling us that there is a data cache on the ring that can be used against Meteor. As for himself, you know those times in a game where if you were actually there, you would do something different than your character? Something like throw fucking Fern off the bridge too, you asshole! So the fucker informs us that the ward where Corey fell is Lapis Ward, if we wanted to find him. However, at the same time, a massive explosion rings out from the North Obsidia Ward, right next to where we would have to go to find Corey. Is this the work of Meteor 2? Oh, and fuck you, Fern.